Hello again. I promised another DC video and I am living up to my word. Sorry, not sorry, it's about Jason again. Today we'll be discussing how both the fandom and especially the comics often portray Jason's parents and poverty in general. This topic is honestly too huge for one video to cover all of it, but it still feels worth addressing, especially through this lens. But first, a thank you to my wonderful patrons who make these episodes possible. Links below. This topic is rather heavy, but we're basically going to talk a bit about classism in DC through the lens of the Todd family. Classism is a prejudice against people belonging to a particular, usually less economically developed social class, and like any prejudice, it comes with stereotypes. Usually lower income people are displayed in media as dirty, ill-mannered, unintelligent, and this feeds into a lot of real-world bias and discrimination. This comes up a lot in how Jason's often been portrayed, leading up to his death and especially since his return, as I have covered before. But what of the Todd family? Well, the common refrain in fandom tends to be that Willis Todd was a violent drunk and a criminal who Jason disdained. While Catherine might be given a somewhat gentler touch, she's still usually seen as negligent, with little thought given to the context of her actions beyond their impact on Jason. This is in almost comically grim contrast to their original portrayals and the themes tied to them. When we see Jason's parents in his Robin run, they are presented as having been well presented and a loving family. His parents are highlighted as loving him deeply, but that love not saving Catherine from death and leading Willis to try and provide for his family through crime. This also neatly ties in thematically with Jason's introduction as someone who doesn't want to commit crimes, who only does what he needs to get by and is forced into crime by his circumstances, i.e. poverty. Jason is protective of Catherine's memory and is initially dismissive of his father, but upon finding out about his death, he is incredibly upset. These are some of the few instances of real anger we see Robin Jason do before his death. All in all, this is a rather sympathetic portrayal and shows an awareness that poverty leads to crime due to oppressive circumstances, leaving it as the only option, and that it's incredibly unfair. This is also not how they are portrayed in much of comics history after that fact. Willis got at least one other sympathetic portrayal where he actually becomes a supporting character in Jason's story of the Iceberg Lounge. However, this came at the expense of Catherine. Barring that though, yeah, it's not great. The New 52 shows him as a loud, violent abuser who is enabled by Catherine before she, well, dies. An Arkham verse perhaps has the most outright classist portrayal of Jason Todd's parents I've ever seen. It's amazing how the comics got less socially aware over time, so I'll summarize it. Catherine is Jason's birth mother in this timeline. She has Jason on the roof of a dirty apartment building. Willis instantly takes Jason away and tries to sell him to loan sharks. He's beaten for this and left with a kid neither he or Catherine want. Both complain about his presence and the gravity of Gotham dragging them down. Jason is later shown to be much more comfortable with crime than his past counterparts, to seemingly have a willing killing streak right off the bat, and while portrayed as a smart, hard worker, it's framed in this context. Thanks, rich guy, for providing for me. My parents were dumb, poor people who couldn't pull themselves up by their bootstraps. Jason being expected to be grateful for the opportunities Bruce provided him also pops up in the fandom and comics a lot, which is pretty skeezy. Kids shouldn't have to be grateful for their bio or adoptive parents doing their job. Which is another thing. This framing and portrayal of Jason and Stephanie is rather contrasted to another Robin, Tim, and also to Bruce, both of whom lash out in fits of destructive anger but never have it held against them either by other characters or the narrative, nor have it seen as a reflection of some kind of inner malice or inherent flaw, and neither of whom are ever expected to be grateful for their vast wealth. It's just a thing that they have. There's a recurring sort of element with both of them portrayed as just sort of naturally good and just plain better than the people from poverty. Don't even get me started on all the times Jason's portrayed as a dumb brute or Stephanie a dumb blonde so Tim could be the smart one in the room. Also, to be clear, just because this doesn't happen in every comic doesn't mean it doesn't happen in a majority of comics. Much like with the two Robins who come from poverty being frequently portrayed as the bad Robins, the incompetent Robins, the Robins who didn't deserve the title or the responsibilities, and interestingly the Robins who Alfred ends up being weirdly hostile to at times. It's a pattern. Also, on the Alfred thing, I know Alfred was nice when Jason was around, but his first instinct upon seeing grieving Bruce Wayne is to chuck the dead kid under the bus and blame him for dying. It took Bruce years to get to that stage. Of course, this isn't me explicitly saying Alfred is intentionally written as classist, just that there are recurring elements in the portrayal of characters from poverty and how other characters, not necessarily from poverty, respond to them. There are stereotypes that are aggressively embraced in favour of even trying to give a nuanced portrayal. There are recurring character beats and hostile receptions to these characters, and I think that's worth acknowledging, both in comics and in fandom, because we can do better. If you would like to help support these episodes and get early access to scripts, videos, stories and art, please hit up my Patreon. If you would like to commission 3D art, please swing by my coffee and we can chat. For now though, that's all. Thanks for stopping by.